I know
Oh,
you
yeah.
do the same because we send us each other
Right.
shit all the time.
Yeah, and it's both sides. It's just absolutely amazing.
Both sides. But taking the time, you're right. Why do you think your feed is filled with that? You may not like it, but if they go, oh, well, he's interacting negatively or positively with any of this stuff, we're just going to feed it to him nonstop.
Right. Like, how do you not understand that the entire point from their standpoint is to just feed you more stuff that you're going to interact with?
Yeah.
If you interact with stuff that you hate, that's on you.
Exactly. And you're going to keep getting it. And guess what? You're going to keep interacting with it too. Yeah. Even if it's like under that tweet going, why do I keep getting fed this bullshit?
Right. Like all Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it is seeing is like, oh, another reply.
Feed him more. Yeah. Serve it up, baby. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Stochastic.com MLB Strategy Show. Back from the weekend. Hopefully you guys had a good one. I'm Dave Loughran at Lafayette_D, joined by Adam Scherer. Ship My Money DFS 8-game Monday slate. What's going on, brother? How you feeling?
Pretty good. Got outside, went golfing yesterday, got nice and sunburned, but felt good to get out.
Yeah, my back took a bit of a burn yesterday. I went over my my father-in-law had a hip replacement last year, and those can be pretty tough.
I thought you were going to say hippo, and I was like, oh, wow, this is all coming really full circle.
No, I went over and mowed his lawn yesterday because he's got this crazy hill in the back that you can't, like, you have a hip replacement. It's not easy to do. It's a decent sized yard though. So I'm burned up pretty good, but feeling good. I didn't really drink this week. I had a couple beers yesterday, but woke up today feeling really good.
I drank Saturday night and was feeling worse than I expected yesterday, but after like one hole of golf, I guess I'd sweated it all out. Just didn't drink yesterday. Had a bunch of Gatorade, a bunch of water. So
didn't drink on the course.
Didn't drink on the course.
Okay. Yeah. Nice. How'd you shoot?
Horribly, but I hadn't played in like probably 2 years.
Still a good time though.
Yeah, and I mean, it was one of those. I had enough good shots where I was like, okay, I probably should get back in the swing of this. But
also probably didn't expect to shoot well.
No, not at all. And also like just kind of hit a wall after like 12 or 13 because it was really hot and I haven't golfed in like 2 years.
Well, happy to have you guys with us. Hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. Subscribe to the channel. And hey, if you're watching, listening after the fact, leave a comment down below. At the very least, we read all of them, try and respond to all of them as well. And if you're in podcast form or haven't yet, all of our stuff you can find in podcast. We're going to be pumping a whole lot more out for the NFL season 2. I have a monster giveaway. I say that with sincerity. This is no clickbait type of language here. Monster giveaway coming up around the start of the NFL season. So if you're not over there in podcast form yet, suggest doing so. Whether it's Spotify, Apple, whatever. Anyway,
I feel like I look like I'm wearing like mascara or something.
It looks totally normal. Honestly, I would be the first person to tell you.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I just looked and I was like, why do I look like I'm wearing makeup like Eric?
Like you have black. Does Eric wear makeup or does he look like he wears makeup? Which are you saying? I'm
not sure, but I feel like Eric wears makeup. I
Yeah,
feel like Eric has worn makeup at some point.
You think
on
so?
a show. On a show.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, right around.
Oh yeah, that's what that's why I remember.
Chicago.
Yeah, that's why I
we
remember.
went to Chicago last year, right, Jordan? Yeah. How'd that happen? Oh, wasn't fisticuffs? Who says that? All right, we got 8 games to talk about though, so let's make it happen. We got tools updated. We good to go here? What's that? I think we
cleared my throat.
Oh, I wasn't sure if you responded. It was over me talking rudely. All right, so let's do it. Colorado, Washington. So when I first made this run sheet like less than an hour ago, let me just pull this up, and I had to mirror that to my screen, which is dumb. So whatever. It's still TBD for Washington. Remember this happened last week where it was the whole Corbin Williams thing? I'm assuming it's Corbin.
Works for me. I
mean, he hasn't pitched since Tuesday. You would think it. Let's just go with that for now. Jake Bird is starting for Colorado, but again, you'd have to assume this is an opener, right? I mean, the guy throws like 1-2 innings tops anytime he's out there.
Yeah, you would think so.
All right. So let's talk about it then. Colorado plus 120 on the road, 9-run total here. Assuming it is Corbin, he hasn't been that bad lately. And he's actually had a couple games where he was remotely impressive. You look at 2 of his last 4 starts, Corbin was legitimately good to the point where if you played him, you were probably sitting real nice in tournaments. He went 7 1-run innings with 6 Ks against Texas. He went 7 scoreless with only 5 hits, 9 strikeouts against Seattle back 4 starts ago. He's had some, one rough start mixed in along the way, but a 6 strikeout, 5 in the 3rd inning start against Chicago Cubs last time out. Corbin's actually been pretty decent lately.
Yeah, and I mean, I've said it before. He's not a horrible real life pitcher. He's horrible by his contract standards, and I think that sort of gets that's like the narrative with him. But he's got a 4.5 xFIP this year, only a 15.7% strikeout percentage. Not a good DFS pitcher. 1.4 home runs per 9. But it's not like he's a horrible pitcher. He does have a good matchup here against the Rockies. They only have a 4.2 implied run total, which is very low for a team facing Patrick Corbin. So he's never safe to go to, but you do have 15% ownership coming in at 7,300, 12% chance of being a top 2 scoring pitcher. There's not a lot of good pitching on this slate. We used, I think, all of the good pitchers in baseball on Saturday, so they're not pitching today. So yeah, Corbin looks fine. Obviously it can go really poorly, but good matchup and not a lot of good options on this slate.
And it makes sense. 8-game slate, he's getting around 15% ownership, right? Like that makes sense. 12% top 2 probability, so slight negative leverage in the top pitchers tool, but nothing significant there.
Yeah, and also when you look at the quote-unquote good pitchers on this slate, you have Darvish, Castillo, Allen, all in at least good strikeout matchups. Darvish and Allen in good matchups overall. Maeda's got a good strikeout matchup. Other than that, John Gray facing Houston, Jose Barrios facing the Dodgers, and then a bunch of just garbage. So you basically have 4 good pitchers in good enough matchups. And other than that, you're going to find some sort of red flag on everybody.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like Colin Ria versus Cincinnati right now is 15% owned at a somewhat similar price point to Corbin. So yeah, look, I don't think anyone's going to sit out here and like stake their claim to Corbin being the best option on the slate. But I just wanted to point out that he actually has been pretty decent lately. That's all I would say. He hasn't been bad. And the strikeout rate seemingly improved over the last month of baseball as well. On the other side, I don't really think we can even talk about pitching here. So let's talk about some bats. Top stacks tool is updated for today. Top stack percentage for Colorado sits at 5% top stack probability, 4.6% aggregate ownership. And then for Washington, where are we at? Right. 6% top stack probability, 8% ownership coming into them, though. They do look decent as far as value goes. And it is Colorado, just bad pitching across the board. I know it's 2 bad teams, but what do you do with the hitting in this game?
The Nats look pretty appealing. It looks like there's a good chance Carl Kaufman ends up either being the starter or being the bulk reliever. And this dude's not good. We talked about him earlier in the year. He's one of there's always a couple of guys every year that comes up and you look at his stuff, you look at his minor league numbers, and you're just like, how the hell is this guy pitching in the major leagues? In this case, I think it's probably just that he was an early pick in the draft. The Rockies don't have any pitching, and the front office can now say, hey, we did a good job. We drafted a major leaguer, even though he has no business being there. So it looks like a good spot for Washington. They've been hitting better recently for whatever that's worth, which isn't much, but they are still cheap. CJ Abrams is a high upside shortstop option, has some power, has stolen base upside. Lane Thomas is a legitimately good hitter. And then you just get more cheap bats. Keibert Ruiz, good catcher option. Dom Smith is cheap. Meneses is cheap. Candelario is only 4K. Corey Dickerson's cheap. So just a really cheap offense in a good spot against what I assume is some combination of Bird and Kaufman. They are middle of the pack in top stack percentage at 6%, but they are also cheap. So they come in 4th in stack score. Colorado closer to the bottom, 5th from the bottom in stack score. It is an okay matchup against Corbin. We just said Corbin's not a terrible pitcher, but he's also not somebody that you're ever scared to take bats against. 200 expected ISO allowed to righties this year, 180 expected ISO to lefties. The problem is just where exactly do you go for the Rockies? CJ Cron at 4,400 is going to look pretty good. Ryan McMahon, 4,500 is fine. Diaz is okay. Bryant, Grichuk, I guess, are okay. But obviously Bryant has not been himself this year. So there is some upside for the Rockies. They are pulling like 5% ownership with a 5% chance of being the top stack. It's not a horrible team to get to, but I do prefer the Washington side.
Let's keep it moving then. We've got a bunch of games to talk about. We've got Kansas City and Cleveland, Ryan Yarbrough and Logan Allen on the mound. Now, Allen, you mentioned it just a minute ago. A lot of ownership, 33%, 24% top two probability. So, not bad. I mean, he has pretty decent strikeout stuff. Obviously, this matchup from a strikeout perspective looks good. We can get into that. He's striking out 24.3% of batters on the season. So there are some pretty decent numbers there. You're talking about a guy with a sub 4 xFIP at 394. He hasn't been bad. Also, another thing to consider with him, not sure how much it matters for this particular matchup, but 0.8 home runs per 9. I mean, overall, he's been an above average arm throughout the year.
Yeah, he has. There's one big issue with him and then one concerning issue, and they're kind of related. He's been very inefficient with his pitches this year, so he has had trouble going deep into games. That wasn't really a problem when he was like 7K, 7,500. Now that he's up to 8,700, that is concerning if he's just not going to be able to work deep into games because he throws a million pitches. You saw 2 starts ago, 3 2/3 innings against Kansas City. Didn't give up an earned run. He threw 98 pitches in 3 2/3. You had 89 pitches in 4 innings. His start before that, there was a minor league stint in between his most recent start and the ones I'm talking about. But 3 innings, 77 pitches against the Padres. So there is that concern. That's not to say he can't get deep in the games. But then the other concern is that in his last start, he faced Pittsburgh. He went 5 innings, struck out 8 guys, gave up 1 hit, and he got pulled at 77 pitches. Allen is a rookie, so there is some chance that Cleveland is also now sort of dialing back his innings in an effort to not have to shut him down at the end of the season. So on the one hand, he's inefficient. And on the other hand, I'm not positive the Guardians are even at this point going to allow him to throw 100 pitches. So all of that stuff is concerning. It is a good matchup. It is a relatively weak pitching slate. And like you said, he is having a good season overall, 24% strikeout percentage, 3.94 xFIP. But I do think that the pitch count issues, whether it's that he throws too many pitches or that he might be restricted somewhat, does concern me at 8,700.
Who are the guys priced in the same ballpark? Okay, Gray against Houston, Kenta Maeda against Seattle. Yeah.
Right. And when you look at it like that, that's why Allen is still a reasonable play. He's getting 33% ownership. He's the second highest owned guy on the slate. Maybe that's a little bit aggressive given that I don't know how many innings he's pitching. But like I said, you have red flags for pretty much every pitcher on this slate. In Allen's case, it's not the matchup. It's not his talent. It's just exactly how many innings can you hope for from this guy.
For sure. And that's, another thing, not to jump too far ahead, but similarly with Kenta Maeda, how many pitches is he going to throw?
Right.
He hasn't thrown 90 pitches. Granted, he's had a few starts where he's been highly efficient, specific, last one against this same Seattle team, 6 1/3, 2 runs, 9 Ks. But he threw 80 pitches. He threw 80 pitches and got taken out midway through the 7th, right? So that's another issue there where he's getting 24% ownership. His pitch count has clearly been limited throughout the whole season or since he came back.
Yeah, like you said, he hasn't thrown 90 pitches yet this year.
Right. We'll talk about that. But first, Ryan Yarbrough, and any interest in pitching outside of Logan Allen in this game?
Yarbrough is cheap. He's not very good. He doesn't have a good strikeout matchup. 17.5% strikeout percentage as a starter this year, 4.88 xFIP. If you wanted to say, hey, pitching on this slate kind of sucks, let me just play this $5,800 guy and hope for the best, I think that's a reasonable case to make. But 1% ownership, 5% chance of being a top 2 scoring pitcher, I don't anticipate getting much of him.
All right. How about bats against Yarbrough, bats against Logan Allen? Again, Logan Allen just doesn't give up a ton of power. It isn't to say that we can't find something here, but the total in this game currently sits at 8.5. It's, a modest total for 2023 baseball. Yarbrough and Allen going. Do you like bats for Cleveland or can't? Cleveland's at least going to put balls in play.
Yeah, they just don't have much power, which is the problem. Yeah. But on the Kansas City side, I mean, everybody at this point knows I'm probably going to play KC just because it's what I do. They're really cheap. So they're coming in terms of stack score, they're middle of the pack because they have a 10.7% chance of being the top value stack. That's the second highest behind Seattle. Only a 3.5% chance of being the top scoring stack. But Bobby Witt, Salvador Perez, high upside options at weak positions. Michael Garcia, 3,500, probably leading off. Melendez is free. Olivares and Massey are free. So it's just a really inexpensive team that does offer some value. But like you said, Allen's not a bad pitcher. He's allowed a 155 expected ISO to righties, 161 to lefties, 24.5% K percentage to both sides. So if you go to KC, it's just for the value and what you're able to build around them throughout the rest of your lineup. The Cleveland side is going to look a little bit more appealing. 173 expected ISO to righties this year from Yarbrough. Jose Ramirez is obviously the guy that's going to stand out. He's $5,700, but he's always one of your best one-offs. Then you can get to, Rosario, Josh Bell, David Fry, whoever. But this lineup outside of Ramirez really doesn't have – Naylor has power, but not a lot of power in this lineup. They do have a 4.9 implied run total, though. They are third in stack score, 7% chance of being the top stack, 6% ownership, but also nearly a 10% chance of being the top value stack.
Seattle and Minnesota. Man, does it not feel like every time we talk about Seattle, it's both pitchers in that game getting a lot of ownership?
Yeah, and it feels like they've played Minnesota for a week straight.
I know. I actually went back and looked. I wasn't sure if it was a home and home series, but it's not. It
was there was a series in between
with the White Sox. Yeah, because the Lance Lynn. I remember Lance Lynn being pretty popular.
Yep.
But yeah, here we are again though. And if you're looking in the top pitchers tool right now, there are 4 pitchers of 20+% ownership on an 8-gamer. Matter of fact, they're all 24+% owned right now, where we have them projected. And 2 of them are from this game. Castillo, 27%. We got him at 26% top 2 play probability. So, a good play there. And then Kenta Maeda, despite the fact that he's not throwing a lot of pitches, 24% ownership, 21% top 2 probability. The strikeout upside is clearly big in this matchup. It is amazing to see an $8,600 guy who probably throws around 80 pitches, maybe 85 pitches, at $8,600, still getting still owned by almost a quarter of the field today.
Yeah. So one thing with Maeda, he threw 80 pitches last start. He did go 6 1/3. Whenever you see a pitcher get like start the next inning, it makes me a little bit less concerned about the pitch count. It makes it more likely that he kind of got in trouble. He gave up a home run, I think, in the 6th. So I don't know what happened he gave up another run in the 7th. So I don't know exactly what happened in that inning, but I get the impression he probably could have thrown more pitches if he hadn't gotten in trouble in the 7th. But like you said, like we said before, hasn't thrown 90 pitches yet this year. You certainly can't expect him to just go out there and give you a 95 pitch performance. But at 8,600
it's also I think your point is 100% valid, but it's also one of those spots like where if he does go out there, even with 80 pitches, if he gets in the smallest amount of trouble, a lot of pitchers, they're like, all right, just finish the inning out. And that doesn't seem to be the case.
Right, exactly. It's like, hey, we gave you a little bit longer leash and you're wasting it. Now get the hell out of the game.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, at 8,600 on this slate, still completely reasonable. Good park to pitch in, good strikeout matchup. Now, it is supposed to be 85 to 90 degrees in Minnesota, and there is a lot of power in Seattle's lineup. So it's not the safest spot, but you have to take what you're given on a slate. And he does have the highest strikeout percentage at 28.6% of anybody starting on this slate. He's, again, got a good strikeout matchup. Seattle's active roster against right-handed pitching this year, about a 24% strikeout percentage. League average in terms of production, 101 WRC plus. But they strike out 24.9% strikeout percentage overall. So the upside for Maeda
second highest in the league. It's just Minnesota's behind Minnesota, ahead of everybody else.
Right. And Minnesota is a similar team too, where it's like they strike out a lot, but they also have quite a bit of power. So it's not safe. It's just you have a good pitcher, a good strikeout pitcher, and a lot of strikeout upside. Modest price tag at 8,600. So he looks pretty good. And then on the other side, Castillo looks really good. He is 10,600, so you are paying a premium. He's $1,200 more expensive than the next most expensive pitcher on DraftKings, but he is really good. 27.7% strikeout percentage, 3.65 xFIP this season. He has had some home run issues. 1.45 home runs allowed per 9 innings. That's a little bit scary when you're facing the Twins, and it's especially scary when you look at his splits, and he's allowed a 224 expected ISO to lefties. Most of the Twins' power is from the left side. You do have Correa from the right side. Buxton, I don't think, is likely to play today. But if I don't know exactly what his deal is. If he was in, obviously there's power there too. But it is a powerful lineup. So it's concerning that Castillo has given up power this year, but he is overall a really good pitcher, really good strikeout stuff. He's getting about 27% ownership, 26% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. Certainly expect to be getting to a lot of the pitching here.
All right. So lowest total on the slate at 8. Again, it's not far lower than some of these other ones we've seen in Seattle. This is probably a 7.5, but Castillo, a good pitcher. Kenta Maeda, sure, he's limited as far as how deep he can go in the games, but strong pitcher. Are you interested in any bats here, or do we just look elsewhere?
Yeah, I think the bats are actually interesting because of the pricing. Seattle's actually 5th in stack score, despite the relatively difficult matchup. Only a 5% chance of being the top stack, but a 16% chance of being the top value stack. And it just goes back to what I've been harping on with this team for I think a week and a half now. I think it goes back to the previous Minnesota series. Julio Rodriguez is slightly below $5,000. For him, that's a cheap price tag. Everybody else is free. Cal Raleigh is the next most expensive guy on this team at $3,500. He's a power hitting catcher that's cheap. Eugenio Suarez, $2,900. Teoscar Hernandez, $3,200. Ty France, $3,100. Mike Ford, $2,700. If Taylor Trammell's in the lineup, he's $2K flat. There's just a lot of upside here at inexpensive price tags. So those salaries make it so I don't care that much that they're facing a pretty good pitcher, because you're just going to get such high ceiling teams when you go to Seattle, because you're going to be in a situation where you have 5 bats from Seattle that have tons of upside, and then you just have really good players everywhere else in your lineup. So it becomes a situation where, it's a tough spot for the Mariners. They're not that likely to succeed, but when they do, you just have studs everywhere else. So the Mariners look actually pretty good. And then Minnesota's the same play, essentially. It's just that their matchup is more difficult against Castillo. But like I said, he's had issues with power this year, particularly left-handed power. Julien, Kirilloff, Kepler, Wallner, Larnach, all very inexpensive. Correa is only $4,400. The upside for both stacks is high. It's just that the likelihood of them coming through is a little bit lower because they're facing good pitchers.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. They're going to be, Minnesota low owned. Seattle's actually higher owned than I thought they would be. Yeah,
it's just how cheap they are. And I think it's this game is just one of those where if you could only pick one side, I think you're going with the pitching. Hitting is harder than pitching. There's limited pitching options on this slate, but it's really difficult for the most part to envision how nothing from this game ends up working out. Because if Castillo, if with how cheap the Mariners are and how much power they have, and how cheap the Twins are and how much power they have, if those teams don't give you good value plays from their offenses, it's really difficult for Maeda and or Castillo not to be 2 of the higher scoring pitchers today.
Yeah, unless somehow there's just no strikeouts among 2 teams that strike out at the highest clip in baseball.
Right, against good strikeout pitchers.
Right. Yeah, exactly. All right, 3 down, 5 to go here. Before we do, though, shout out to some of the boys. I went on the Twitter this morning and came across an onslaught of screenshots. And boy, just a fantastic feeling seeing this stuff. Lineup generator. You guys already know it's $4.48 for the first week, right? And you can set your stack types, all of that stuff. You can see what the optimal projection is for every lineup, how chalky or contrarian every lineup is. Save the ones you love, discard the ones you don't like, upload them to CSV, or just do it straight from your phone. It's been crushing for people lately. And we got another one. Melvin Mayo, first win using the MLB lineup generator. Thanks, guys. $1,000. Boom. $1,000 on, like I said, dude, it's $4.48 for the first week. $8.95 every week going after that for the MLB lineup generator. Well, he just covered his costs for a heck of a long time to come. First place in the MLB solo shot, 10K solo shot, $1,000 up top. Melvin Mayo coming in hot. Links to all this, by the way, in the description and in chat. If you're looking to spend less than $4.50 a week and understand that this is probably going to be spitting out better lineups than you're making, and it's no knock on anyone. It's just, obvious. We're simulating thousands of lineups we're already throwing the bad ones out, and the ones that are being generated, depending on if you're deciding you want, because you can select chalky stacks, chalky lineups, contrarian lineups, you can do balance, you can do all lineups, stack types, 4-4, 5-man stacks, all stacks, however you want to play it. You can lock players in, you can swap players out, although I would recommend not going too heavy-handed on that stuff. But yeah, I mean, you have one nice win like this, and you've just covered everything, and then you're free rolling for God knows how long. That's assuming you just never win again using it, but you probably will. And then look, all of our other tools, 50% off, not just the lineup generator for the first week. You want to go a month of MLB, a month of all of our sports, MMA, PGA, NASCAR, you name it, everything across the board. We might not have football yet, but we still have everything else, all of the tools, 50% off, whether it's a week or a month for a single sport or all sports. And Elway's Army, I got to shout out our boy, because this dude keeps crushing. Jordan, I feel like he's in Hall of Fame segment every other week. $20,000. Thank you, guys. Stochastic Tools, hands down the best. See, don't take it from me. Take it from Elway's Army. He took first place for $20K, fifth place for $2,000. He finished 23rd, 45th, 75th in the Saturday MLB squeeze. So congrats, dude. Love to see it. Dave Oliver is actually his name. 50% off anything. You want the lineup generator, or you want to do everything for 50% off. Lineup generator, MLB, and PGA are included in the full month or the full week for these sports as well. So check it out. And if you ever have any questions, my DMs on Twitter are open if you're not exactly sure what you're looking for, but link in the description and in the chat. All right, let's talk about this next one we've got here. Texas and Houston. You alluded to John Gray at that price point earlier. Slight favorites on the road against Houston. I mean, barely. But 9-run total here. Brandon Bilak on the other side of this one is pitching. Well, let's actually start with John Gray. 12% ownership, 14% top 2 play probability, $8,700. I'm not going to ask you if you like him or not. I'm going to ask you what your thoughts are on John Gray, given that he's essentially the exact same price as Logan Allen and Kenta Maeda, who are both very high owned.
I think he slots in behind them, just like we have him showing up in ownership right now. 13.8 DraftKings point projection on Gray. Maeda is at about 16. Allen's at about 17. So a slight gap there, but nothing too crazy. From a range of outcome standpoint, Gray certainly can beat those guys. He's getting about half the ownership of Maeda. He's getting a little more than a third of the ownership of Logan Allen. If you're in this price range and you need to save ownership, going to John Gray over those guys certainly makes sense. From a projection standpoint, he is slightly behind them. It's not a great matchup against Houston. They are still missing Altuve and Alvarez, so it's not the same extremely dangerous lineup that it is when they're healthy, but the top of the order is still pretty difficult to strike out. You do get strikeouts towards the bottom, so overall it's not a horrible strikeout matchup. It's just that the strikeouts are distributed in a way that isn't exactly ideal for Gray. But he's a pretty good pitcher overall. 20% strikeout percentage, 4.47 xFIP. Strikeout numbers are down this year from where they normally are. But yeah, he looks fine. I do think he's a little bit behind Allen and Maeda.
Brandon Bilak on the other side, I mean, he hasn't been that great, right? You're talking 1.38 home runs per 9, 4.72 xFIP, striking batters out at 18% on the season, 204 x ISO to lefties, 196 to righties, so below average in both of those categories. Texas bats, though, you know, the one thing you're always going to run into is value. They're not particularly cheap. They're 7.6% aggregate ownership. What do you do with the Texas bats today, where there aren't a ton of stacks that stand out outside of like St. Louis, and we can talk about them against Ryan Nelson in a little bit?
They look pretty good. The ownership, if you just look at the top stacks tool, it suggests they're going a little bit over-owned. But if you look individually, it's 11% ownership coming into a $2,900 Travis Jankowski, 11% ownership coming into a $3,800 Nate Lowe, 10% coming into a $3,400 Duran. Everybody else is 7% or less. So you don't have Corey Seager. He's on the injured list. That does make the lineup quite a bit weaker. But the good hitters aren't getting much ownership because they're expensive. Semien at 7%, Garcia at 6%, Heim at 5%, Young at 4%. So if you're full stacking this team and using the actual good hitters, you can get them at pretty modest ownership. And Brandon Bielak hasn't been particularly impressive this year. 20% strikeout percentage to righties with a 196 expected ISO, 15.5% to lefties with a 204 expected ISO. The Rangers look pretty appealing at modest ownership.
By the way, I mentioned Nelson start. I don't know if it's Nelson. We know Adam Wainwright starting. We have Nelson in the top stacks and top pitchers tool right now, but still nothing officially announced. Any interest in Houston bats against Texas? I think this is probably a much more difficult spot to get to.
Yeah, I think it's pretty tough to get to. Kyle Tucker is obviously always a great play. 175 expected ISO to lefties for John Gray this year. Only a 119 expected ISO to righties. There are enough good hitters in this lineup where it's just, if you're playing Bregman, you're playing Tucker, and then the rest of the lineup is relatively inexpensive. There's nothing wrong with that, but I prefer getting to the Texas side if I can. Houston is actually dead last in stack score. Pretty difficult sell, I think.
All right. Now, Cincinnati and Milwaukee to me is a pretty interesting game for a couple of reasons. 9-run total. It's not in Cincinnati, it's in Milwaukee, but it's not exactly a terrible park for hitting. Colin Ria allowing a 242 ISO to lefties this year, 184 X ISO though. So the suggested he's been a little bit unlucky there. Against righties, 147 X ISO, 146 ISO. So not exactly bad. But he is coming in right now with 15% ownership, 12% top two probability in the top stacks tool. For those of you guys wondering, if you're new to this channel or to the show, top stacks tool, top pitchers tool on the stochastic site. You'll hear us reference them a lot. Let's actually start with him at 6,500. Is this just strictly a price play against the pedestrian Milwaukee offense?
Yeah, pretty much. Both guys. I mean, Ashcraft is 6,800.
Cincinnati. Go ahead. I got it backwards.
I was confused. I was like, I'm pretty sure you're talking about.
I got it backwards. My fault.
Yeah. So for Colin Rea, it is a price play. He's 6,500. He's fine. 20% strikeout percent, 19.8% strikeout percentage, identical to John Gray. 4.4 xFIP, just about the same as John Gray. He's $2,000 less expensive. Not the best matchup. Not a great park to pitch in, but it's not the worst matchup either. Like the Reds have talent. But it's a lot of young talent. It's a lot of guys that are unproven at the major league level. You saw them go through that really, big hot streak where everybody was hitting, but that's not sustainable. And you're going to see struggles for these guys as well. 4.4 implied run total. Overall this season, a 17.5% strikeout percentage to lefties, 184 expected ISO, 21.5% strikeout percentage to righties, only a 147 expected ISO. So lefties have been the problem here. And you're going to have De La Cruz, Friedel, Fraley, Votto, Benson from the left side. So again, it's not an easy matchup. It's just that pitching on this slate isn't great. He is cheap. There are bats that we want to pay for. So it's just when you look in this price range, you have, we talked about Corbin at 7,300. Colin Rea is even less expensive than that. You have Michael Grove against Toronto. That's not anything you're going to feel good about. Ashcraft on the other side of this game is not something you're going to feel great about. So there's just not good cheap pitching options. That's why Colin Rea is showing up a bit. And Ashcraft on the other side does get a good strikeout matchup against Milwaukee. He's just not a very good strikeout pitcher. 15.8% strikeout percentage, 4.87 xFIP. Same price range as Colin Rea. He's been the worst pitcher of the two, but he is getting less ownership.
How about Milwaukee bats against Ashcraft then? I mean, look, it's probably not a bad thing that he's outside of Great American Ballpark, but it's not like he's moving to, PNC Park or Cincinnati right. or Seattle here either.
Right. Yeah. It's a better park. It's not the best park. 134 expected ISO to lefties, 171 to righties. He has done a decent, what?
So that's not that bad.
No, yeah, he's done a decent job limiting power. He just doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. But the Brewers will give you strikeouts. So, it's not a pitcher that I'm ever going out of my way to get to. But I do think you could make a very reasonable case that he's not that different from Colin Rea, and he's getting like a quarter of the ownership.
And another thing too, like I don't mean to harp on home road splits too much, but we know that this park is pretty insane when it comes. We know the Great American Ballpark is pretty insane when it comes to power. 11 of his 14 home runs allowed this season have come at home. 1.9 home runs per 9 allowed at home. And on, or actually, hold on, 1.8 on at home. On the road, 0.7 home runs per 9. Huge split there away from Great American Ballpark. Yeah, it is an interesting point that you make. How much different is he than Colin Rea? What's the ownership difference there?
It's like 15% for Rea and 14 or to like 4% for Ashcraft. And we have them projected 1.5 apart. So like, yeah, Colin Rea projects better, but from a range of outcome standpoint, that's not a big difference.
No, Milwaukee 22.8% K rate versus righties on the active roster. Cincinnati 22.6%. The difference is that Cincinnati has a considerably more power as well. 175 ISO to Milwaukee's 139, 107 WRC plus to Milwaukee's 88. So, yeah, I mean,
and neither of these guys are great strikeout pitchers. So most likely, what this comes down to, but like who wins between Colin Rea and Graham Ashcraft is runs, and in a lot of cases, who runs better on balls in play, like who gets line drives hit at people as opposed to in the gap, and obviously that's about as much variance as you can possibly get.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, Ashcraft has been weird lately. Like he's gone. This is kind of funny. Look at the last month that he's pitched. 6+ innings in all of them. Earned runs in these. So how much production he allowed? 1, 1, 1, and 2. And of course, we could look into how lucky or whatnot he's been. The only problem is just no strikeouts to speak of. So to your point, you're going to need to go deep into it. You're going to need to give like 6+ innings. You're going to need to limit runs because the strikeouts, it's hard to envision him getting more than like 4 or 5 strikeouts at best.
Yeah, exactly. As far as splits go, Ashcraft has been much better at limiting production to lefties, and it does make sense for him to be reverse splits. He relies on his cutter 58% of the time to lefties, 47% to righties, and that's a pitch that a lot of times is going to play better against opposite-handed hitters. So you do see a 327 expected WOBA to lefties compared to 379 to righties. Looking at Milwaukee's lineup, pretty balanced lineup. They're 2 of their 3 best hitters are right-handed in Contreras and Adames. So again, that's not ideal for Ashcraft, but it is nice that that's pretty much the extent of it.
How much do you want to get into bats here? I mean, sure, we talk about the fact that both of these guys are viable today where pitching isn't that great outside of a handful of options. And 2 of those options, we don't know if they're going to throw 85 pitches, and they're both mid 8K. Do you like Cincinnati and Milwaukee bats today?
Somewhat. I like the park. I like that they're facing 2 pitchers who aren't horrible, but don't miss a lot of bats, and certainly you can get to them. The problem with Cincinnati is just that they're still really expensive. They're priced up from that run that they went on where everybody was playing over their head. I mean, you look at Elly De La Cruz, he's $5,900, and from an upside standpoint, that's great. But you're talking about somebody with like I don't have it in front of me, but somewhere around a 100 WRC plus in the majors. He has power, he has stolen base upside, but the guy's more expensive than like so many really, really good players. And from a median standpoint, it's a lot. And you see that everywhere else. Matt McLain, 5,700, Fraley, 4,600, Friedel, 4,300, India, 4,500. So there is upside here. It's just that you're fully paying for it. And as a result, they are 4th from the bottom in stack score. They are getting 8% ownership, 7% chance of being the top stack. Milwaukee getting 7% ownership, 5% chance of being the top stack, but a 7% top value percentage compared to about 2% for the Reds. I think my favorite plays in the game are Contreras and Adames, just given the issues that Ashcraft has had with righties and the fact that catcher and shortstop are just difficult positions to cover. And these guys are both giving you a lot of upside. But, if you are able to find the salary for the Reds, great. But I think in particular, Contreras and Adames are the spots I really want to get to.
Man, it is pretty crazy with Elly De La Cruz, though. 32% K rate to a 6% walk rate, 174 ISO, 290 X WOBA, 99 WRC plus.
Yeah. Like the first week he was up, I still remember somebody in chat saying Elly De La Cruz is already better than Gunnar Henderson. And it was like, okay, give him a month, see what he's doing.
Yeah. I still think this guy could be electric for his career.
At the very least, he's an extremely exciting player. He's got all the tools in the world. He's got power. He's got speed. Yep. Hitting in the major leagues is really hard. And most guys do not just walk up from AA, AAA and just start lighting up the majors.
Exactly.
And then keep lighting up the majors.
17 stolen bases, though. Man, yeah. he's exciting, like you said. He's stealing home and all that stuff.
Oh yeah, and he could very easily, like, there's always, what happens is you come up, sometimes you have success, sometimes you don't. But if you do, then it just becomes an even bigger focus for every other team in the league to figure out where the holes are in your swing. And then they figure them out, and then you have to readjust. You saw it with Henderson at the start of the year for Baltimore. Like, he was good when he came up last year, and then this year he was getting in trouble because he was being too patient. He was getting himself deep in the counts. He had to adjust and start swinging earlier in counts. He did, and now he's raking again. De La Cruz is very talented. He probably at some point will make an adjustment to whatever teams are doing to him, and he'll improve. And it happens even with veterans. Like, Juan Soto was struggling earlier this year because teams were pounding the bottom of the strike zone. He wasn't swinging because he doesn't hit those pitches particularly well. And so he was just hitting in 2 strike counts. He eventually had to say, okay, I'm going to swing at these pitches and do damage. So teams stopped doing this. And, then he got better. So you see it all the time, but, the talent is there for De La Cruz. It's just that he is priced right now for essentially what he did his first 2 weeks in the majors, when there's no way that continues.
For sure. All right, let's talk about Pittsburgh and San Diego. Pittsburgh plus 210 on the road. Quinn Priester against Yu Darvish. Priester looks, as essentially as bad as anybody in the top pitchers tool, right? He's down there with Adam Wainwright today. 1% ownership, but 0.2% top 2 play probability against a power-laden Padres offense. I don't think we need to spend much time on that unless you have some pushback, but I think we could probably touch on Yu Darvish here. Highest owned pitcher by a mile, 46% on DraftKings right now, where, of course, you're rostering 2 pitchers. He has a 31% top 2 probability. What do you make of Darvish at 9,400 against this Pittsburgh team?
Looks great. I think it's the best combination of talent, matchup, park, all of that. Now, I'm pretty sure every slate for the last 10 days that's been the case. The pitcher has kind of sucked, but you're just going to go right back to him. 9,400 is a very reasonable salary. He's $1,200 less than Castillo and pretty comparable. 25.9% strikeout percentage, 3.76 xFIP. Good matchup against Pittsburgh, 98 WRC plus, 23% strikeout percentage on their active roster against right-handed pitching for the season. Darvish has struck out lefties 30% of the time, righties only 21%. So that is kind of interesting. He's also given up more power to righties, but you don't have a lot of right-handed power to worry about in this lineup. Andrew McCutchen, Henry Davis, I think that's the extent of right-handed power bats on the Pirates. 3.2 implied run total. So Darvish looks very, very good.
Yeah. Lowest implied total of any team on this slate. Do you like San Diego bats against Priester today? What do we make of this Priester fella pitching for the Pirates?
Yeah, it looks good. 5.3 implied run total for the Padres. Priester came up a start or 2 ago. His minor league stuff.
He's made 1 start so far.
Give up 7 earned and 5 1/3 against Cleveland. Doesn't project to be particularly good, at least right now. He was right around, I believe, like the top, the 100th best prospect in baseball. Fangraphs has him at 117, but doesn't project to be great yet. Projects for about a 16 to 17% strikeout percentage, depending on what model you're looking at. 4.6 to 4.9 FIP, depending on what model you're looking at, and gets a very dangerous matchup here against the Padres. The only real negative is that the game is in San Diego, so not a great power park. Priester was also pretty good at AAA this year at getting ground balls, 53.8% ground ball percentage. And he's been a good ground ball pitcher throughout the minors. And I think this came up in his first start. Somebody had mentioned that, but that's not something I'm going to be overly concerned about when you're talking about a pitcher, brand new to the major leagues that isn't likely to miss a lot of bats. You have a lot of really good major league hitters going up against him. I'm not overly concerned that he got ground balls in the minors. It's still, a good spot for these guys. So if you can find the salary for the Padres, they look pretty good. They're not overly expensive top to bottom. Tatis is expensive at 6,400. Soto and Machado are north of 5K. Bogarts is just shy of 5K. But other than that, they're reasonably priced. So from a stacking standpoint, it should be pretty easy, even if you can't get all of Tatis, Soto, Machado, Bogarts. Tatis, Soto, Machado, Camposano at 2,400, Grisham at 2,800, something like that is still going to allow you to build pretty strong teams around them.
Any interest whatsoever in any individual bats for Pittsburgh?
Not really.
Okay.
Like it just the obvious, like Sawinski's good, Reynolds is good, Davis is cheap and maybe good at some point. But like It's a lot more because of the park. It's a lot more difficult than like last series. You had the Pirates against the Angels. And even in tough matchups, like against Ohtani, against Detmers, it was like, okay, these aren't the craziest plays because they're cheap and they're in a really good hitter's park. Now it's like, well, they're cheap, they're in a bad matchup, and they're in a bad park. It becomes a lot more difficult.
Yeah, and to be fair, they're the lowest owned stack in the top stack tool. So projected to be the lowest owned stack. Also projected to have, they have not projected, but they have the lowest top stack probability as well. The only thing they have going for them is semi-decent value in the stack, but it seems like we could look elsewhere, especially given that pitching isn't exactly star-studded throughout this slate anyway. All right, 2 games to go here. Before we do, hey, drafters, I know a lot of you guys have already jumped on over there because they got the brand new pick'em format, NFL, MLB, NBA, NHL when they return, PGA, MMA. You can up to 100x, which is pretty cool as well. So you're talking about like the multipliers when you're putting these lineups in, especially, let's be honest, you guys that are in non-legal betting states, you know, having the ability to go over there, grab your over-unders, put them into a card, up to 8 legs, up to 100x your entry. They have the safety feature too that you can toggle on in order to protect yourself in the event that you don't hit all of them. I will say though, you probably want to play it without the safety feature on, because I was looking at it like if you were to play let's say a 7-leg, let's say you were to go wild and you got a 7-leg entry here. I'm just going because we got all football stuff up now, which has got me very excited. Without safety, if you were going to play a $10 card, 7 of 7 gets you $650. And you get nothing at 6 of 7. 7 of 7 gets you $250 with the safety on, and $25 with 6 of 7, and $20 for 5 of 7. So like, yeah, 5 of 7, 6 of 7, you make some money back. But if you hit 7 of 7, you go from $650 to $250. I'd probably play it without it on. It is a cool format though. Gives you that option. You can mix as many sports as you want. And don't want to bury the lead here. 100% first match deposit bonus up to $100. You have $100. Say you got some excess money sitting on other sites and you're like, oh, how do I just turn this into an additional $100 by doing nothing? Throw 100 on the draft. If you have 20 extra, throw it on the drafters, double your deposit bonus. Because Adam, they got the best ball contest too. Everyone here, you know, we talk, I love underdog, play on underdog. I love the DraftKings best ball format. Although I'm a little leery after seeing, did you see that insane collusion lineup the other day?
The DraftKings one?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I mean, to me, the best part of that was just learning how bad people are at math.
Well, in what sense?
So somebody posted a poll asking what % chance that, like, if that team were allowed to continue, what % chance would they have of winning the like 600,000 person DraftKings tournament? And people were voting like 80%, 50%. Like,
that's insane.
The lowest option in the poll was like sub 1%. And that had, you know, like a decent number of votes, but nowhere near what it should have. Somebody else said that they thought the equivalent, somebody said that they thought if you could just draft the 18 players that you wanted on underdog, you would have an over 50% chance of winning the regular season first place, which I think is also batshit crazy.
Yeah, it has to be. There's way too many variables too. Like you can't, right. But also they could have been a little smarter with that.
Oh yeah. Like and that's the concerning part. That's what everybody's concerned with, is like, obviously what they did is just blatant, but you could just not be an absolute idiot.
And this was slow draft too. So how easy is it to, you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that stuff mostly gets cleaned up and there's going to be enough people to notice it. But
and also the thing that I think the point that I saw people making on Twitter that I agree with most is, yeah, like some of those might slip through the cracks, but if somebody, like whenever somebody wins,
you're still getting a great lineup is what you're going to say, right?
What?
I'll explain it differently. My fault.
No, I was going to say, like, at the end of the day, if somehow like a draft like that just slips through the cracks, DraftKings doesn't catch it, then they win like the tournament, you're going to see the draft board and be like, what is this?
Yes.
You know?
Yes. Also, if one of those drafts happens that I'm in, I'm also getting a super team.
Right.
Like if they don't void it.
Right.
But you're right. It's clearly going to be there's no way you can escape that at all. There's just no way. Honestly, I'd go as far to say that it's going to be hard to escape even in rounds like the first round of advancement, because if someone looks at this and goes, what the hell? And tells DK like, yo, look at this lineup is impossible.
Right.
That could happen in week 3, even week 1, when you see who you're going up against.
Yeah, exactly. Like they're just going to get noticed. I did. And I mean, I think it's a hard solution. I did see Two Guns suggest, and I haven't thought of any real issues with it, suggest that DraftKings just like implement some sort of like, you can't take a player more than X picks ahead of ADP, and then just like drop it off, as you go on. So like in the first round, you can't take somebody more than 20 picks ahead of ADP or whatever. And then by round 12, you can take whoever you want. The only issue with that is like,
there are dumb people out there.
Well, not even that, but like there's going to be injuries, and we see how slow DraftKings is to adjust pricing for injuries. Are they actually going to be adjusting their best ball rules where like, Josh Jacobs got hurt, so now you can take whoever.
True. Yeah.
But but other than that, but yeah, like I don't think it's a massive issue, but it is concerning.
I don't care. I love best ball, dude.
Oh yeah, it's so fun.
What's that?
It's so fun.
It's so fun, dude. Drafters though, you're not going to get a bonus signing up on DraftKings. I'll tell you that much. I mean, I'm playing over there, but drafters playing is anywhere I can. Drafters 100% first match deposit bonus up to $100, $2 million, $20 to enter. The $1.2 million NFL Best Ball Championship, $2 million prize pool, $300K up top. And I will say, softer competition than some of these other places. Go max out your bonuses everywhere you can, whether it's Pick'em or Best Ball. Don't leave free money on the table. Drafters link in the description and in the chat. And shoot me some of these teams if you're drafting them and you feel good about them. I'm down to talk Best Ball all damn day leading up to the season, because it's the best form of fantasy football, hands down, outside of DFS. Link in the description and chat if you guys want to get those bonuses and start checking it out. All right. Game 7, St. Louis, Arizona, Adam Wainwright. And we want to just go with Ryan Nelson for now?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Let me just make sure that we don't have an official pitcher. Yeah, we still don't. No, we still don't. All right. That's fine. Let's go with that. We've got that projected in the tools.
Yeah, everything has him listed right now. Fangraphs has him. DraftKings has him.
You had mentioned to me before the show that you were getting around 40% Wainwright right now. Can you explain that?
Veteranosity.
Yeah. Solid. Yeah, there is that. In fact, yeah. I don't know how you project for it, but dude, Adam Wainwright's cooked. He's cooked.
I thought that his fake DL stint or IL stint was going to last a lot longer.
Yeah, he's not ready. He's not ready.
I thought it was I just thought his career was done, and that because like, do you remember? So he had a lot of really bad starts, but he had the start like 2 before where he was actually crying in his post game about like hoping the team wouldn't give up on him. And then he goes out, gets lit up again. And like, even during the game, like Cardinals fans on Twitter were like, can we just announce his injured list stint now? Like, let him go out with grace. And then like the minute the game ended, they're like, Adam Wainwright's going on the IL. And I was like, okay, like he's done until maybe like September when the Cardinals are officially out of it. They'll let him, pitch another game in Busch Stadium or something. But I did not think he was actually going to come right back.
You're right. And it's no surprise whatsoever that the St. Louis Cardinals, the Arizona Diamondbacks have a 10.5% top sack probability, second highest on the slate, behind only St. Louis right now, who we have projected to go against Ryan Nelson. As far as our stack scores go, which we have in the top stacks tool, St. Louis number 1, Arizona number 2 in the top stacks tool. Should we just go straight to hitting here, or is there anything you want to get into with arms?
There's not really anything I want to get into with arms. Wainwright's likely to throw like 65 pitches. So on top of all of the other reasons you shouldn't play Wainwright, there's also that. Nelson, assuming it's him at 6,700, he's getting like the same ownership as Graham Ashcraft. Relatively tough strikeout matchup against St. Louis. There are quality hitters in this lineup, but he's similar to Ashcraft in the sense that if you just need a cheap pitcher, it's not like you have anything good on this slate. So maybe you get a little bit, but near 5 xFIP for Nelson, only a 16% strikeout percentage. Still nothing that looks good about him.
What looks good about some of these stacks today outside of pretty much everything?
Yeah, everything. I mean, Wainwright is terrible. They're first and second in stack score. St. Louis is first because they're a little bit less expensive, and we actually have them with a higher chance of being the top stack. We don't have a line right now, though, I don't think. So that could obviously change. But Arizona second. I mean, Wainwright this year, like, yeah, maybe he really was dealing with a shoulder issue and he's going to be better, but better doesn't mean good. It just means not like the absolute worst pitcher in baseball. 304 expected ISO to lefties this year with a 10% strikeout percentage, 469 expected WOBA. Like, you could probably grab any 55-year-old retired major leaguer and they could put up the same numbers as Adam Wainwright right now. Like, he's been that bad, especially against lefties. Righties, he's been bad. He hasn't been like unbelievably bad like he has against lefties, but still a 201 expected ISO, 383 expected WOBA, only a 12% strikeout percentage. Ketel Marte and Corbin Carroll look absolutely fantastic. Perdomo will be from the left side. McCarthy's got some power and stolen base upside for cheap from the left side. Alec Thomas is cheap if he's in the lineup. And then, again, you shouldn't be shying away from Christian Walker, Lourdes Gurriel, whichever guy is playing third base between Rivera and Longoria. But Marte and Carroll in particular look absolutely fantastic.
Also, if he was dealing with this shoulder injury, which, look, maybe, but that would have mean that he was dealing with it since the beginning of the season, because he had been bad since the beginning of the year.
Right. My only kind of theory on Wainwright, he did pitch in the World Baseball Classic. So maybe he just kind of, like, his normal routine was out of whack. Maybe he kind of was having some issues throughout the year, and maybe he'll be better. But again, like, even last year, he wasn't good. You were stacking against Wainwright last year too. It was just, he wasn't embarrassingly bad like he is
right
now.
And also, like, last year still wasn't. It's not like he's getting a lot of ground balls to alleviate the lack of strikeouts. Only 17% strikeout rate last year, 43% ground ball rate. This year, 11% K rate, 35% ground ball rate, and a 5.8% swinging strike rate. Like, that was the one thing that was worse than anything. Just zero ability to miss bats at all. So if these balls weren't going straight to defenders, like, it's just, you can't competently pitch that way, especially when you're not keeping them on the ground.
Yeah. And his fastball velocity this year is down nearly 2 full miles an hour off of last year. And last year he averaged 88.5 miles an hour. It's not like he had
Jamie Moyer.
Right. Except Jamie Moyer, like, still could kind of get outs.
Kind of could at like 75.
You're right. Yeah.
Miles per hour. And
yeah. I mean, Wainwright's never been the hardest thrower. Like, his highest fastball velocity for any season was 91.4 in 2006. But he didn't have miles per hour to lose on his fastball, and he's down pretty much across the board. So again, that points to maybe he really was dealing with a shoulder thing, and maybe 15 days magically solved it. I think it's more likely he's just completely washed.
Holy shit, dude. Jamie Moyer's 60.
Is he really? Wow.
And I just looked it up on Baseball Reference. He's from where I live.
Oh, really?
I had no idea. I had no idea. Yeah.
That's cool.
That's pretty well, the town over, but it's basically like the same.
Yeah, that's how Denny Nagel is for me. He actually would work out sometimes at the same, like, indoor complex that we would use in high school.
That's cool. 60. Like, I know he was old when he was. All right, so hold on. He last pitched in 2012.
He pitched until he was like 49 or something.
Yeah, 40. Yeah, he would have been 49. Amazing, dude. Wow. 49 years old. He pitched from 86 to 2012. 86.
He pitched from 4 years before I was born until I was 22. I mean, Wainwright, obviously not to that extent, but Wainwright debuted my freshman year of high school.
That's amazing. He's 41. I mean, he's up there. Moyer's a massive outlier. Like, I don't know if you could do that anymore, but yeah, Wainwright's 41 years old.
Semi-related, the Mets-Red Sox game was on ESPN last night, and they were doing the K-Rod broadcast with Michael Kay and Alex Rodriguez, and they brought on Bill Lee, who I don't remember, but he pitches for the Savannah Bananas now, and he's like 70 something. So he said he's gotten paid to play baseball for 7 decades now because he like started playing minor league ball in the 60s, and now he's still playing for Savannah.
Wow. 7 decades.
Yeah.
It's a nice life. Anything else for this game, or just kind of load up on bats? I don't want to go too crazy getting into the weeds here.
Load up on bats. I mean, obviously Wainwright's the big talking point here, but Ryan Nelson, 182 expected ISO to righties, 218 to lefties. Those are like normal bad numbers, but still pretty bad. And the Cardinals are not expensive. Goldschmidt, 6,100, Arenado, 5,800. The next most expensive guy in their projected lineup is Gorman at 4,200. So they should be pretty easy to get to. That is, I think, why they, or at least part of the reason that they're first in stack score. For me personally, I would still flip Arizona and St. Louis just because it's an otherworldly matchup against Wainwright. But these look like the 2 best offenses on the slate.
Let's wrap this one up with Toronto and the Dodgers. By the way, take a second, atone for your sins here this beautiful Monday morning, and hit that thumbs up. We're 21 away from 100. Look, is it a long shot? Maybe. I get it. It's Monday. People are sluggish. They don't feel like doing nice things, but I think you guys are different. And all 300 plus, 315 of you watching right now, 21 of you out there to make this day a little bit better heading into the afternoon. So we'll see what happens. If not, no hard feelings. Just a subtle reminder. All right. Michael Grove, Jose Berrios. This game actually, in LA has a 9-run total today, but Grove is a guy that has a 20% K rate, 4.41 xFIP against Toronto. 2 good offenses. Berrios is good himself, but he's pulling. How about this? 4% ownership, 13% top 2 pitcher probability. Of course, he is basically the same price as Yu Darvish, but among all of these guys in that 86 range and higher, from Kenta Maeda to Logan Allen to Darvish to a more expensive Luis Castillo, you could throw Gray in there, who's even getting 12%. The biggest outlier among anyone in the upper echelon of price tags today is Berrios going against, of course, a good Dodgers offense.
Yeah, tough matchup for him at 9,200. Solid pitcher, 23.5% ownership, 3.98 xFIP, but the matchup just makes it really tough to want to get to him. 5% projected ownership, 7% chance I'm looking at the Dodgers, not Berrios. 4% projected ownership, 13% chance of being a top 2 scoring pitcher. So, again, in your large field tournaments, if you're getting the popular teams and you need to save some ownership, 4% owned Berrios is fine, but he is quite a bit behind those other guys. We have him projected about 5.5 points behind Yu Darvish. We have him about 4.5 points or 4 points behind Castillo, behind Allen, behind Maeda, behind Gray. So it's purely an ownership play if you get there, but I wouldn't anticipate getting much of it.
Eric T said these aging pitchers like Bumgarner and Waino need to retire before they become a complete gas can. Well, too late, but says sad as hell for their legacy. I've always wondered that, like, how much do you think it actually affects their?
It doesn't,
right? Like, does a pitcher's legacy, if they just, they like die at the top of their game, does that mean more than somebody who legs it out until the very end? I think it's just different types of legacies, like what could have been, but I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm not it's sure that it tarnishes it either.
Right. It just changes the conversation. Like Jose Fernandez, you're like, damn, he was really good. I wonder what he would have been over the course of his career. With Wainwright, you're not saying like, man, he was really good and he was like a key piece of World Series titles and he's a Cardinals legend, but man, he sucked at the end. So it kind of all balances out and he was just okay. Like you're to me, it's not sad from a legacy standpoint. It's just sad from like, I feel bad for the guy because I grew up.
Why are you still out there?
Yeah. Right. Like I watched him for so long and he was so good, like I compared it to like, if I were a Cardinals fan, to me, it's like when Cal Ripken retired, he wasn't good anymore, but he wasn't embarrassing himself. But what if he had just said, I want to play 3 more years? The Orioles aren't going to be like, no, they're going to be like, shit. Okay, I guess we have to let him do this. And then he goes up there and strikes out 80% of the time. It would be like, okay, this is hard to watch.
Right, for sure. I think the same thing with basketball, right? Like when LeBron James ultimately wears down and decides that he keeps wanting to play.
I don't think this will happen with James, but I get your point.
Yeah, I'm just using like an extreme example of a good player. If that were to happen and he's like coming off the bench because, hey, let's say he wants to play with his son or something, Adam.
Right.
And You know, nobody's going to be like, man, remember how bad he was late in his career. No one's going to care at all.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, like I was going to say to some extent Michael Jordan, but he wasn't terrible with the Wizards. He was just a shell of what he used to be. But yeah, I mean, to me, it's kind of, and Bumgarner's different too, because Bumgarner's not even old. He just
33.
Yeah, he just ran out of gas from the way that he was used earlier in his career. But to me, it's also, I mean, you have to think about it. Like Wainwright probably has no idea what to do if he's not a baseball player.
I think a lot of athletes are like that. Yeah.
Right. You know, like there's a lot of guys where it's like, okay, you know, I'm tired of playing baseball. I don't want to put in the work anymore. I'm going to go do whatever I'm interested in. But like the guy's been playing baseball his entire life. He's been in the major leagues for 20 years or whatever. Like I'm sure there's a part where it's just like, okay, well, baseball is what I do. Like what am I supposed to go do now?
Not to mention, like if you're including like deep playoff runs and spring training and getting ready, baseball is like an all year thing.
Oh yeah.
Outside of a couple months, you know?
Right. Like the guy is 41 years old. And I am sure since he was 9, at least, he's been just working at and playing baseball every day of like every year.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. SMP said, well, Carmelo had a shorter cliff to fall off because he was hysterically overrated by vast swaths of the public.
Carmelo's a weird one. Carmelo's in that range where like I think he's overrated and underrated at the same time, because he was overrated as a basketball player, but he was still a really good scorer and, you know, still a Hall of Fame basketball player. But because like he was overrated, then you get everybody pushing back like, nah, Carmelo sucks, when like he obviously also didn't suck.
Carmelo was good, but he wasn't good enough to sustain the style of basketball that he played.
Right.
In the sense of like, if you're going to be a guy that is just extraordinarily ball dominant with a massive usage rate, like you need to be one of the best every year.
Right. He wasn't, the way he played, he needed to be capable of carrying his team to a title, and he wasn't.
Exactly. Or he needed to really understand how to become a legitimately good playmaker on top of it.
Right.
Which never really happened. But he was a good scorer. He just wasn't good enough, like you said, to carry a team. And
right.
That's a problem when that's the style of play that you have.
Right. If you're going to be that type of ball dominant, like ISO scorer, you have to be like Kevin Durant efficient.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And he wasn't. All right. Wrap this one up and then we'll take a quick look at the Sims tool. Jordan, you got that pulled up. We'll hit that in a second. All right. With bats here, Adam. And as always, appreciate you guys hanging out with us on a Monday. We're 2 likes from 100. So my assumption is that we will get there.
Here's a good point from Eric T too. I don't know if he was even trying to make this point, but he said, I remember Roy Halladay's final year. He could barely get through 5 innings and looked like he could collapse on the mound. I don't even remember that. So like
the ocean.
Well, sure. But like my point is like 5-10 years from now, we're not going to, if Adam Wainwright's name comes up, you're not going to be like, oh my God, remember how bad he was in 2023?
No. You're not going to look at the fact that Roy Halladay throwing a perfect game in the same season that he threw a no-hitter against the Reds in the postseason in the same year and be like, yeah, those were good, but man, remember how bad he was that last season? No one's going to care about that.
Right.
You're right. It just doesn't matter. And then there's players that their career just ends way too early from, like I said, death or something.
Right.
Halladay was retired at the time, the plane crash, but you know what I mean? Those are more so like, hey, those guys were great. It would have been awesome to see what could have come of them.
Right.
But
Jose Fernandez, Ventura.
Yeah. Yeah. It happens a lot in football with guys retiring with bad injuries where they just can't come back from it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Calvin Johnson, perfect example.
Yeah. And my perfect example, because he's my favorite player, really, Jamal Charles.
Yeah. Yeah. Injuries for Charles.
Yeah. Like Charles has he has the best yards per carry average, like ever. You know,
he was so much fun. Yeah, like he was kind of forced to retire. Calvin was just like, there's no reason for me to keep doing this.
Right. But same thing in the sense that like Jamal Charles, had he not had 2 non-contact ACL injuries within a couple of years, if he never suffered both of them, dude, he came back the next year. People don't remember this. So remember when Adrian Peterson came back from the ACL, racked up 2,000 yards and had the MVP season?
Vaguely.
All right. Adrian Peterson tore his ACL in like late in the season. And they're like, yeah, there's no way he comes back. He comes back week 1 the next year and racks up 2,000 rushing yards and wins the MVP. All right. This wasn't like a week 1 injury the previous season. This was, I think, week 15 or something.
Right.
Think about how nuts that is, right? Charles did the same thing. It was like earlier in the year, the same exact season he tore it as Peterson, came back and had 1,700 yards from scrimmage the very following year. So like, he wasn't Peterson level, but he's one of the best ever players from an efficiency standpoint and just doesn't get talked about like that. But
oh yeah, he was fantastic.
Anyway, do you like bats from either Toronto or the Dodgers?
Yeah, I mean, both offenses are really good. Jose Barrios isn't a bad pitcher, but you still have a 4.9 implied run total for the Dodgers. 187 expected ISO to lefties for Barrios this year, 173 for righties. So he does give up some power, and you certainly have a lot of it for the Dodgers. 5% projected ownership, 7% chance of being the top stack. They are relatively expensive. On the other side, Toronto against Grove, they are projected to be the highest owned team at 12%, getting 7% ownership. Grove is cheap, so like you can take some shots on him at low ownership in tournaments if you have to, but certainly not going out of your way to get there. 162 expected ISO to righties with a 23.9% K percentage. That is nice given how much power the Blue Jays have from the right side, but they're also not your average right-handed hitters. They're tough to strike out. They're really, really good. He has had issues with lefties, only striking them out 17% of the time, 224 expected ISO. Brandon Belt is only $3,100. The problem is on DraftKings, you can only roster one of Belt or Guerrero because Belt only has first base eligibility now. On FanDuel, obviously, you can still roster both. But Brandon Belt looks good at 3,100. Varsho from the left side is only 3,200. And then you just get a lot of good right-handed bats for the Blue Jays. So even though the pitching in this game isn't awful, the offenses do still look pretty good. From an individual ownership standpoint, Belt pulling about 12%, Jansen leading the way at 16%, Guerrero at 11%, Bichette, Springer, Merrifield, Varsho, all 10%. So you are getting ownership throughout most of the lineup for the Jays.
All right, let's look at Sims. Before we do one thing, a comment from Rance. I don't know if he was referring to best ball, but he said too many secondary receivers can get 2 touchdowns in a game. Season-long contests seem rough. Same with RB by committee. That's why best ball makes it better, because you're drafting your studs. And then if your approach is right, you're drafting a lot of high upside guys late in the drafts. You're not setting your lineup each week. You're not making trades. You're not doing ad drops. So you're doing like 18 or 20 rounds, and you're pulling guys that could give you that upside or could have those, as you know, Adam, like those spike weeks where a lot of weeks they don't do much, but they're also, you know, guys that could rip off 250-yard touchdowns in the same week, and then they're in your starting lineup, but you don't have to start them the next week. It's whoever finishes at the top that gets in your starting lineup, which I think is why you and I love best ball more than the other formats. It just makes it better.
Yeah, it's way less time consuming, and you can, I mean, to the point about, you know, wide receiver twos and running back by committee, you can factor that into your strategy and drafts, and then you don't have the headache of trying to choose who to start. It just plays out. And
yeah,
the other low-key nice thing about best ball is there's such a long period of time between when you do your draft and when you get paid out that even if you lose money, it feels like you're making money because
it feels like that's actually a really good point,
dude. It's like right around Christmas. You can be down money, like, you know, I'll end up playing probably $3,000-$4,000 of best ball entries, and I can lose 50%. I'm still getting $2,000 around Christmas.
Yeah. And dude, if you broke even, you're like, oh, what a great day.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. But, and if you guys join late, we're talking about, because drafters, 100% first match deposit bonus up to $100, their best ball format, $2 million prize pools, link in the description and in chat. But for me, it's just, I've been looking to load up on a lot of rookie wide receivers this year. You know, you go back and look at rookie receivers, 1,000-yard seasons. Go back in like the early 2000s, even the mid, like 2008, none of them. Now you look at the last few years, you're getting like 2 of them every year that are breaking out for 1,000+ yard seasons, right? Olave last year, Garrett Wilson with dog shit quarterbacks. The year before that, like, and then you got just so many of these rookies. I love taking shots on some of these young guys where no one really knows what to make of them. No one knows where to draft them. And I can be like, oh, I get him in the 16th round, and he might end up having a 900-yard, 5-touchdown season, and I'm getting it for free.
Yeah, exactly. Guys like that are always interesting. Like it's always interesting at the end because like your two options are basically young guys that you have no idea what to expect from them, or just like washed up veterans where you're like, well, they're gonna get a chance. They're gonna be out there. They used to be good, and
Right. But you know that their
I prefer the
ceiling
young
is
ones.
like, their ceiling's 500 yards and 3 touchdowns on 45 receptions.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So I'll just take the shots on the high. I'll just take the shots on the unknown all day long. For those of you guys new to best ball, and our fantasy football channel, Stochastic Fantasy Football, has everything you need to know. So you don't dive in without understanding that you want to stack players and you want to do all of that stuff. And, if you want stack week 17, I know there's a lot of, debate surrounding whether or not that's worth it. But Adam, let's wrap this up. A little look at the Sims tool here and see where we're coming in at. Jordan, throw that up. I'm going to pin you to the screen. For those of you guys still sticking around, let's see what we got in the Sims tool. Sims tool over on the website. You guys know where you can find that. Link in the description and chat for that as well if you wanted to get in. We had a dude just take down a huge day with the Sims tool. Tweet somewhere. I don't know, but it was a monster win. Oh, there it is right there. What was it? Oh, 2,500 for Schaefer, but he's been using it. Yeah. And the mini max. Love it. We had a guy in our Discord take down 100K yesterday too, Adam, or Saturday.
Nice.
Yeah. I don't think he's tweeted anything yet, but 100K. All right, let's do this. So let me maximize this. Can you quickly explain how this works in like 30 seconds or less for anybody that's looking at it going, what in the heck is this?
The Sims tool in general?
Yeah, just in general.
So what you're doing is you're creating up to 2,000 lineups. You're putting them into the Sims tool. You can use our projections. You can use your own, whichever you prefer. And you're simulating those lineups against each other. And it's giving you a bunch of different data on it, which lineups do the best. And so the idea here is you want the individual player exposures to be similar to what the field's going to look like. And that's going to account for the field's ownership. So it's creating a situation where like the best projected lineups aren't necessarily just always going to show up at the top, because if Ronald Acuna is in 45% of the lineups that you put in, it's still like, and then he does well, it's still those 45% of lineups competing against each other. Whereas if some 2% owned guy does well in the simulation, he shows up the top. So it's just simulating these lineups against each other thousands and thousands and thousands of times, and then giving you all of this information on what players are showing up in the best lineups the most, what stacks are showing up the most, what lineups as a whole are the best. It's the most succinct, easiest way to like bring together all of the different data that we talk about in content, projections, range of outcomes, ownership. It ties all of that together and essentially gives you the answer.
I assume Elway, the guy, Dave Oliver, who I showed the 20K win from earlier with using the tools, I assume he used the Sims tool because this perfectly encapsulates it. I saw your tweet response to this yesterday or 2 days ago. No, yesterday. Somebody responded to him. He's like, what did you see in the tools that convinced you to play these offenses with low stack scores yesterday? And you had responded to him. You go, I don't know about him, but I know I ran the Sims, entered my lineups, and said, whoa, why the hell do I have so much Washington? It was one of those slates where I didn't look at what I had before the slate started because I was short on time. And so I enter my lineups. I looked to see what I have after lock. And I had played 50 lineups in like the $15 or whatever it was. And I think I had like 20% Washington stacks. I played 150 in the $3 and I had like 15% Washington stacks. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know why I have all of this, but whatever. But I think it was just a case where they weren't getting any ownership. It was a small enough slate and they were just showing up at the top because when they did well, it was just really easy to win with them. You just have to be willing to turn the emotions off. Like, yeah, and you do that by not even looking at your exposures till after lock.
Yep.
You know what I mean? You just, okay, this is what I have. We're rolling with it. Anyway, let's see. Simulated ROI is coming in. So the top 5 lineups, Adam, a 5-man St. Louis stack, 5-man Kansas City, 5-2 St. Louis, Cleveland, 5-man St. Louis, and 5-man Arizona. That's interesting because both of them are relatively popular. They show up great in the top stacks tool from a stack score and from a top stack probability. Looks like the Sims tool is suggesting they might still be a little under-owned given what the results we're getting.
Yeah, and For the most part, the ownership sum on those lineups still isn't that high. So a lot of times what you're going to see is that there's low owned pitching or, low owned one-offs. But it's also, and again, it's just that like it's taking everything into account. So maybe Arizona isn't necessarily under-owned, but maybe there's not really under-owned other teams either. So then it kind of just gets back to, well, let's just play the best teams if there's not any massive edge in terms of ownership.
Jordan, can you go to stack ROI as well? All right, let's see. Sort by 5-man stack ROI. St. Louis at the top.
Yeah, St. Louis, a couple of the cheap teams with KC and Washington. Cleveland, we know, is a good stack.
And then go to player ROI.
Yeah, and I the thing to keep in mind here, it doesn't mean that these are the best plays. It's like when we talk about a player being under-owned on a show, you're not trying to just build a bunch of lineups that have Jose Barrios, but it is telling you that of the lineups that finish at the top, Jose Barrios is in a lot of them. So it's just kind of suggesting like that, and it goes with what we talk about a lot, where the way you utilize players has to do with your entire lineup building process. And so on a slate like this, where right now we're getting a lot of those St. Louis stacks, a lot of those Arizona stacks, those teams are going to be popular. And so using somebody like Barrios, who isn't a great play on his own, but is low owned and at least has the ability to pitch well, is a good approach. But like, it's not saying, hey, Jose Barrios is the best play on this slate, you should be jamming him in. It's saying the Diamondbacks are a really good play, the Cardinals are a really good play, and Barrios is good enough that you can use him with those teams and save ownership, and so he shows up a lot.
So before we go, can we take the top 50 and see how much exposure in those 100 top 50 sim ROI lineups have Barrios?
You're talking to Jordan, right? Okay.
Yeah. Let's see. Scroll down, see we. I'm just curious to see how much of the 150 would be Barrios, because I think we have him at what, like 4% projected.
Jordan, you can go to filters and then sort by pitchers. Change player to position. And then just contains P. For value, just put P.
There you go. All right.
Yeah, so
down.
So yeah, Barrios still barely showing up because of the price. The one that's interesting at the top is Grove, who is basically the same play as Barrios. He's just cheaper.
Right. Okay.
And the other thing too, like for me, if that's so for one, like this stuff changes as throughout the day because you're going to get lineups, you're going to get value in unexpected spots, all of that. But for me, if this showed up, like if this at 6:30 or whatever were the results, I would just play it all. But you do also have the customization ability to say, all right, look, I get Grove is showing up a lot. I don't need 50%. You can just go back to those lineups, uncheck the worst Michael Grove lineups, replace them with the best non-Michael Grove lineups that weren't already selected, and get to like 30% or whatever you're comfortable with.
That's a great point. So like you can manually overwrite it without doing something dumb because you're just replacing it with the next best lineups.
Right, exactly. Like there's not going to be a big difference between your worst Michael Grove lineup and your first excluded non-Michael Grove lineup. So from a risk tolerance standpoint, if you're like, all right, 30% is enough, you're not making a huge change in your expected ROI by dropping, 10, 15 of those lineups or whatever.
Hey, follow Adam at Ship My Money DFS, me at Lafay_D, LOUGHY_D. Appreciate all you guys hanging out for the entirety of this show. Bit of a long one, and getting us over 100 likes. Sims tool, link in the description. 50% off all of our other tools, lineup generator, all of our tools for every sport across the board, including the premium Discord that comes with it, and the drafters link. Get that bonus up to $100, 100% match. All of that down there. You guys are the best. Shout out to Jordan Klein for producing this one. Deeper Dive live before block. Be back tonight at 8 o'clock. Until then, we'll catch you back here for the next one. Peace.